I always love it when we have a guest that can join us in studio. He played at Friendswood High School, played at Baylor during the run when they made it to get back into bowl business and eventually make it even better towards Baylor winning Big 12 championships. He's been retired from football for a while, and we're now joined by Cameron Kaufhold, former Baylor offensive lineman, in studio. And welcome. So tell everybody what you're doing, because you got a pretty unique business you're involved with.
Very unique, yeah. Formerly of Baylor Scott and White at Hillcrest and Southwest Sports Medicine and those guys. Now I am working remote here in Waco. Our business makes wireless cameras that are used in long-range shooting, training, hunting, indoor gun ranges, all sorts of training elements of military, recreation, government, DOD, all that fun stuff.
Well, that's quite a change there, Cameron.
As I told my wife, it couldn't have been more different. I went from, going to the same building, the same commute every day for 9 years to, waking up, at 7 and wearing gym shorts if I wanted to and walking upstairs and, turning on. You got to put a collared shirt on though when you're on FaceTime all the time, but you can wear gym shorts if you want.
You just hang one in the office there?
I usually keep it right there behind me if I need to, yeah. Yeah.
But you were an outdoorsman, so this is kind of it was in your recreational wheelhouse anyway.
It was something that I had been doing all along since its inception in 2013. I'd been doing it on weekends and just kind of whenever I could, pro staff with, if you will. So it had finally grown to a size large enough that it had sustained. And I had been worn out from the pandemic, and healthcare at that time was a beatdown, if you can imagine. And I was ready for something fresh, something new.
All right, well, you played offensive line under Randy Clements. Coach Browse is the head coach at Baylor, and you guys really set the tone for the last 12 years or so, even with a couple of ups and downs along the way. But what do you think of – we saw what Baylor's offensive line was able to do last year, and Abram Smith allowed them to be that way as well. But the wide zone, and now who they are, they're okay. They've been in a couple of street fights. They've lost them. But there still seems to be that maybe there's something missing. Maybe it's the power back. I don't know. But what do you see when you watch them now?
Well, you and I have talked about this for years, and I will say that the last 2 years, the technique has been there. Like, they're being coached well. You and I had conversations about, like, what are they trying to do? Mm-hmm. We're past that. But no, I think they returned a lot of guys. I know that the stat, I can't remember the numbers that they put on the last game, but most of the guys on that line, Connor Galvin's been there for what seems like 100 years. But yeah, they're playing well. I don't think they have that. They just don't have that back that's going to hit someone in the mouth. They've got speed everywhere. It looks like that. I don't want to say rebuilding year, but it's a team trying to figure out who they are. After an amazing run last year.
You guys had a couple different backs that were, as far as hit somebody in the mouth, Jay Finley hit somebody in the mouth, Ganaway, I don't think he knew any other way, but like you had those guys. Do you block different for different guys?
Well, I don't.
Or do you have to be aware?
Yeah, I don't think you block different, but I think the scheme was a little different.
Yeah.
We ran the zone exceptionally well. And we never really got out over our skis. We didn't do a bunch of, pitches and outside stuff. We kind of knew where our sweet spot was, and it was in between the tackles. And we didn't block different, but we knew what we would get. Ganaway was not going to take it 80, but he could roll and get you a first down. Lake was there at the end of my career, and he was a guy that, could get you -2 or could get you 80. There wasn't really an in-between. But no, it didn't really block differently. I think we ran the zone well, and we ran the play action even better off of that.
how much does just losing even one guy, how much of a difference can that make? Because I'm thinking of Xavier Newman, who was there for a long time, and he's the only non-returning starter. I know Khalil Keith's hurt right now, and he was a difference maker as well. But even returning 4 of 5 starters.
But until you come in sync, it's challenging. Yeah.
Eric Mateos is obviously very good at what he does at Brigham Young and what he's done at Baylor. He seems to also have guys that are somewhat flexible in where they can play. Randy Clements would take a guard and he'd become a center. Take a tackle, become a guard, or a guard to a tackle. Was he one of the best you saw at fitting what you needed and finding the best in what the offensive lineman he had?
Yeah, it seemed like he was always looking for a center. Once J.D. Walton left, it was kind of like, okay, well, now everyone's now a center until you fail. But, yeah, it was like Ivory Wade, who, ended up at center at the end of my career in 2012. He was a, 3-year starter at right tackle. We're like, yeah, we'll just throw you at center. But, yeah, it was something that people ask me all the time, like, what position do you play? And I have to say O-line. Because I was a right guard, I was a left guard. Sometimes I would switch in the same series. He kind of found his guys that could do. He didn't want to ask you to do too much. So I was able to kind of flip it in my mind pretty easily. And so I was able to kind of be that versatile guy that could go back and forth. But yeah, he had guys that were better at right, better at left, dominant legs, flexibilities, and stuff like that. Luckily, I was never flexible enough to play center. I think Jake Jackson probably sent one in the front row of the spring game one time just so he didn't have to play center. Yeah, you can't play center. And if you can't snap.
He did what?
Yeah, he might have chunked one 8 yards over the quarterback's head.
On purpose.
Yeah, it wasn't not on purpose, but he didn't play center after that.
We're talking to Cameron Kaufhold. He's in studio, former Baylor offensive lineman with us on 365 Sports.
So how do you, if nobody wants to play center, how did he convince so many guys? Like Ivory Wade was, he played a guard, he played a tackle like you did, but he'd moved around a little bit. All of a sudden we get to, game 1, Ivory Wade's the center. And it was like, oh, this is interesting.
You ever played that game where you're all drawing straws and no one wants to do it? Yeah, that was kind of how that situation worked out. Ivory was a great athlete, incredibly flexible, very quick, and just was able to move into that position. I couldn't do it. We had some pretty stellar tackles at that time, and Cyril was already halfway to being an All-American by then. So it was like, how can we get the best 5 guys on the field together? And myself and Troy had played with Ivory for 3 years at that point. So it's like, man, I'd rather keep him on the field than, try to figure out how to get someone else in there.
One of the other guys that would move the pile for you back in the day was Glasgow Martin. There was another power back that was a part of the running.
Yeah, put his head down and just hit whatever was in front of him.
Was Spencer Drango the most talented offensive lineman? You were there with him for your final year. He was a blue-chip offensive recruit from Cedar Park. Would you say he was the most talented, or was it Jason Smith? Who was it?
I'd say Spencer was the most gifted. He would do stuff as an 18-year-old, and, us old heads, 22 at the time, would look at him like, how do you do that? It just came natural to him, but he was too goofy to give him any, type of good praise. So Jason was for sure a specimen, and I saw him a couple weeks ago, and he's even more large than I remember. Not in a bad way. He's just a giant human being. But yeah, Cyril was one of those that could push over a car if he had to. Danny Watkins was one of the most just savage players that have ever had the pleasure of being on his team and not the other team. And then, J.D. Walton was wired differently. He was an All-American through and through and just a phenomenal player.
Danny was good for a 15. Not every game, but
if they'd had instant replay back then, he'd have been good for 30 every game.
Close to every game he was good for a 15, and most of the time it didn't hurt him. And it was, I don't know if that was like just sending a message or what, but he was good for a not just a hold. I mean, that's normal. That happens. But an absolute.
Well, he's a fireman.
Yeah, don't cross me.
Well, he was a hockey player.
Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah.
he's like, this is like hockey, right? Worst thing that happens, I get thrown in the penalty box, and we go on. But yeah, he was wired different and still is. I mean, he runs into burning buildings on purpose. An adrenaline junkie.
Did you know
did
then,
it off like when he was on the Eagles was just doing it for free?
Yeah, but did you know then that he didn't love football when he was at Baylor?
Oh yeah,
you knew then that that was just something he was doing.
He loved playing football with us. We had a great group. He was living with JD. I was there most of the time. We had a great group, and I think he enjoyed the camaraderie of being there. Loved playing with Kaz. Him and Clements were great. Jeff Lebby was there at the time. He was a GA grad assistant, but they were like the same age. So we had a great network of guys. And yeah, as he said, he didn't get along with who's the old timer that was at the Eagles when he was there. He was like a legend, but as he put it, he was a crusty guy, and did not get along with Danny. So I think from that moment he walked in and was like, oh, this is not the family environment I just came from. And I think that's where he then went to the firehouse to find that camaraderie and never wanted to go back.
I bring this up a lot when people ask me whether it's a show somewhere else around the country or what we discuss as far as the resiliency of Baylor football. You were a part of that run that got them back into a bowl game for the first time in 16 or 17 years. And then it was torn down in 16. And then here comes Matt Rule, and he builds them back up. And then he leaves, and here's Dave Aranda. Then there's COVID, and it's a terrible year of 2-7. And yet here they are last year with what they're doing and what the expectations are. What does it say, in your opinion, about – it's not a blue blood program, but it's been a really good program for the most part for 12 years. What does it say about the resiliency?
Yeah, it's hard for me to – you look at the blue blood programs, and – I think it's borderline offensive that we're not in that conversation, because you look at, winningest programs over the last 15 years. I got to imagine we're somewhere near the top. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster as a fan and as an alumni, that it's like, you're proud of it, you're not proud of it. You're proud of it, you're not proud of it. And so, especially living here in town, it's been something that I've kind of just kept doing my thing, and it's something that's a part of me, but haven't spent a whole bunch of time up at the facility. One cool story is last year, Wetzel had reached out to me and just said, "Hey, Coach Aranda, wants to introduce himself. He's wants to bring a bunch of the old heads back around and just celebrate the history." And that was never the case after Bryles left. It was like, this is our guys, we're going to lock the doors. But yeah, I just hopped on the phone, FaceTime me, knew all my stats at Baylor, my high school coach, that kind of stuff. I just wanted to say thanks for all you did, and I want you to come around and be part of this program. And so he didn't have to do that. And now it's been 100 years since I played. So it was very cool of him to do that. And I've heard that from a lot of players, is they welcome the old players back, and they want to remember the guys that got the program where it is.
What makes you feel older, that, or like when a guy you played with, like Robert, is now on television?
Yeah. That's still bizarre to me, and I usually hear his voice on a broadcast before, and it's like, oh, that's that goofy dude that I remember. But yeah, I texted him a couple months ago. I was doing something, had the TV on in the background, and he pops on, and in the middle, looks like he's in his living room, just throws a tie on and talks for a couple hours, and it's like, dude, what are you doing trying to go back and play? That's dumb. You've got it figured out. No, he's doing well, and he's doing big things. I mean, I think he's getting more famous doing that than he was playing.
You know what I do think it's interesting, and people ask me this about like Robert. They say, "Well, what, did you see this coming from him?" Like, oh, always. This was something it could. But I will also tell you, you can hear on the broadcast, some people think that quarterbacks are automatically the coolest guys on the field. I think Robert's kind of proving that he's a little bit of a dork in a good way. But like he wasn't, he wouldn't walk in the room like, "Oh, I'm the coolest guy ever." He was just so talented.
No, he'd walk in the room with his knee-high weird socks on, with, some crazy outfit. You're like, oh, and there's Robert. But yeah, now that he's a dad, I think it's funny because he was a dad jokes before he was a dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he brings
so
something.
He's caught up to it.
Yeah, he did. But I think he brings something different to a broadcast. He's not a square like, everyone else is. He's goofy, and he kind of brings that, and he's gotten better. His first couple was like, you don't try to be that funny.
Yeah.
But he's done well. I think he's now like the number 2 guy for ESPN, number 2 crew.
Yeah, he's rising up that totem pole. Somebody mentioned, you talked about, we asked about Baylor and how successful they've been. In the top 10 for the most wins since 2014, which of course was the second Big 12 title, but not in the college football playoff yet. And there's also Oklahoma State near the very top as part of that because they've been really consistent under Coach Gundy. TCU, despite a couple of up and down years recently, they're in that same conversation. So 3 of the teams, 10 teams are part of the Big 12. And, in fact, we just saw Oklahoma State win the game against Baylor. When you watch, you mentioned you see technique, you see scheme, you see what they're doing now. When you watch them play, Paul mentioned this, if you lose a guy, or Craig, you lose a player, how much is it to overcome? They don't have Khalil Keith at left guard, big human being, a pile driver. They have talent there, but he's just different. Can you notice that, or you even get to focus in on that as much right now?
The thing that I noticed the most, and I alluded to it earlier, was you remove a guy, you remove a unit that has played so many games together, and it's not just at 12 Saturdays. It's the pass drills all through the week. It's the just knowing where the other person's going to be. I think that's probably the part that's hardest to recoup is not the individual talent of that guy, but it's how he works with the guys next to him. And I saw that highlighted on Saturday was, they were kind of struggling to pass off a twist. They were struggling with some inside games and some pass rushes that got home, that probably wouldn't, didn't see that stuff getting home last year. So you can tell that, you've still got a lot of great pieces, but it's taken a little bit to jive together.
The cohesion? Yeah. From Troy Yount, would you ask Cameron, if not already asked, which we have, who's the least favorite individual player that you remember in your time at Baylor that you didn't want to face? Or you got this is going to be a day?
On the field,
yes.
Not that I didn't like him personally.
No, not. You can tell us that too if you want to.
It's easy. Sean Oakman was a transfer my senior year. And so before this, whatever you call this transfer portal and all this craziness now, remember the days you had to sit out a year when you transferred? So Sean Oakman was our scout team defensive end the 2012 year. And you want to know why we were so freaking good?
Yeah, you had.
That's what we lined up against on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. And, as Spencer could tell you, by the time we got to Saturday, it was like, whew, at least we don't have to play him again.
Yeah. And sometimes you forget about it. It's the guys who you go against, not so much a guy from Oklahoma State or Texas or Oklahoma.
That 2012 year, we did not play somebody that good the whole year.
As Sean Oakman.
Yeah. Because, you're not playing on Saturday. All he had to do was eat, lift, and show up at practice. He was fresh.
And he's different.
He built different.
Yeah, he's different. All the way around, different kind of a dude.
There's only a couple guys in my career that, you get walked back in a pass rushing drill and you're, just trying to grab something. And you're like, man, he's just way longer than me. And and I'm not small.
You played over 300 pounds. You obviously have trimmed down since your playing days, and a lot of guys do that. Some, unfortunately, they can't. Did you miss the game at all when you played your last game? Did you ever have to go through that time where you kind of had the EBGBs?
Not really. When I walked away, I did it. I was good with my decision. I was seriously dating my wife now. I was almost done with grad school. I was, you mentioned fishing and hunting, and nothing's worse for that than football. So I was just ready to start the next phase of my life. So I didn't do the training. I didn't do the, the combine and that stuff. So I kind of had quite a bit of time. I didn't like wash out and, not get on a program. I had walked away on my own time. But I will say it was a kick in the shins coming back that first year. Everything we'd worked for, freaking Bryce Petty gets the job, and they go and win a Big 12 championship and close down the case with all the guys that I played with. That stung a little bit. I remember, and I'll never forget it, I was standing in the front row of the stadium the podium when they closed the case down, standing right next to Mike Hicks, and both of us had been on that run, and we were the oldest ones out of that group. And just looking up at all the guys that we played with, that came in with, and they're holding the trophy, and we're like, man, we really just missed it, barely, just barely.
Cameron Kaufhold, it's great to see you, man. We really appreciate it. Really
Good to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Philip Blake, somebody asked about Philip Blake, and who's on the chat room as well. Ask him about playing with Philip Blake. You kind of did. He's still playing in the Canadian Football League.
I saw that on Instagram. Yeah, he's still holding on to the dream. And I've been out a long time.
Yes, you have been. Like 10 years almost, I think it is. Yeah.
What was it? Last year was the 10th anniversary of the Heisman Trophy.
Mm-hmm. RG3's 2011 run. And then, of course, he said Sean Oakman is still here as well on the same team. He's still playing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And you always wonder, of course, he had the story that came up and all that story about him, and he was had to go through his trial.
Right.
Would he have played in the NFL?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, that 2014, 13 year, I think he was going to get drafted just off that. Remember that scene at the coin toss where he rolls out there with his shirt pulled up and and it's like tattooed and six pack. I think he would have gotten drafted just off of that alone, because everyone was like, this dude, they don't make many like that.
The combine freak or something like that too.
Freak, yeah.
I think he heard himself coming back another year, a little bit, but because that was at the Cotton Bowl. I tried to ask him about going pro at the media availability, and he was FaceTiming with a girl during the media availability. It was a weird situation.
That would not have gone over well with NFL scouts. They would, or NFL personnel people.
That,
Cameron, thank you, man. Keep up what you're doing. Good job. Good to see you. Cameron Kaufhold, former Baylor offensive lineman, All-American as well at Baylor, along with many offensive linemen during that time. And this is 365 Sports. When we come back, we'll discuss Brigham Young, Notre Dame on 365 Sports. Petty Clinic Low